Well, classic films, including Rocky and Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, have all received tighter ratings classifications. Film critic Van Connor is here to explain why. So these tighter classifications for film, I mean, where are they coming from? Is this something that's always done? Did the organisation who reclassify films do this regularly, or is this a one-off thing?
This is actually industry housekeeping, as it were. You'll notice that the films specifically being referred to in this case are all films that come from, the early 80s very specifically, come from a period in which we didn't have any equivalent to a 12 or a PG-13 rating. It pretty much went from PG to 15. So you either too soft for the adults or too hardcore for the kids. And you had a lot of films like you say, like Rocky, like Flash Gordon, Jaws, Romancing the Stones, another one that just didn't work in that crack. They couldn't fit anywhere for it, so it kind of got lowballed, or it got shoved a bit too high. And now this is a case of the industry pretty much just tidying up the admin side of it.
And this is the British Board of Film Classification who determine these classifications. And it must be said that they don't always reclassify to make the restrictions tighter. Some restrictions do become more lax. But people might read this story this morning and think, oh, well, this is just another one of these examples of the society going woke. And now we've suddenly offended at things that happen in films, decades ago. Is this what this is, or should we just not be worried about anything like that?
It's so easy to take it that way. Like, you could read this story very easily, completely understandably, as, oh, this is another woke thing. It's not. It really isn't. And case in point, if you want to see the practicality of this, but look at the very first Ghostbusters movie, which I think most of us know as a PG-rated film. And there's a very specific joke in that involving Dan Aykroyd asleep in his bed one night that you just wouldn't put in a movie that's rated PG. You'd put it in a movie that was rated 12A or 15, and obviously you have to update with the time. You can't have that in a PG movie now. When we were all kids, PG movies were wacky and starred David Bowie, and nowadays they're children's movies. Times change for ratings, and unfortunately this requires a certain degree of upscaling and downgrading.
Really interesting there, Van, and it's Darren here, that you suggest that things are shifting. I suppose that in itself is not surprising. But which way are they shifting? You seem to be suggesting we're in some ways becoming more conservative.
With film in particular, this past year with HBO Max in the US, this conversation about updating cultural attitudes has come up a lot. You'll remember the story of Gone with the Wind, for instance, and being pulled from HBO Max to then be re-uploaded in the US for streaming with a new addendum put before it that allowed people to take certain events within the film in context. And what we have here is a case with Flash Gordon, for instance, where you have a film that has certain depictions that wouldn't stand up in a film by today's standards that, again, have generated complaints. When the BBC aired Flash Gordon quite recently, I think of the 97 complaints they received that year or that month for relating to films, what you had was 23 of those entirely devoted to Max von Sydow playing Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon. People, I think, need pre-warning in some of these cases. And an age rating, if it's not too severe, if it's not restricting its audience, because a 12A is not precluding children from seeing a film. A 12A is simply saying, look, just ask your parents to explain why you have to ask them to watch this. They're not saying no, just ask them. They're perfectly within their legal limits to ask, to allow you to. It's just there is a reason why this can't just be shown unreservedly to children. There has to be context provided. It's the same reason that Disney have never put Song of the South on Disney+.
Yeah, but in saying that, actually, when it comes down to it, how much, and kind of finally, is film classification really important anymore? It was a big thing to, I suppose, stop you seeing a film in the cinema that you weren't meant to as a kid. It meant they could say, sorry, you're not 15 or whatever. But considering most of this stuff is now online, and you can either probably access it even without your parents, film classification seems a little outdated.
No, I agree with you personally, and film classification historically, to me personally, has only meant having to come up with more inventive ways to sneak into movie theatres. But in actuality, as anyone with kids can tell you, in this day and age of streaming, classification does serve a very important function because it allows things like parental filters, like when you allow your kids to watch Netflix, for instance, they have a sort of locked kids section. Your Disney Plus, for instance, has a star tier and a regular library, and you can lock your kids off from that star tier. So the kids can't stream Die Hard, but they can watch Ice Age. They can go to Netflix and they can watch Jurassic World, the animated series, but they can't watch the live action one. So there is a digital infrastructure that is aided quite nicely by censorship in this day and age. It's a very handy sort of tagging system for digital media.
Okay, Van Connor, thank you very much indeed for joining us there. I'm now intrigued to find out what that scene in Ghostbusters 1 was. I feel like I need to rewatch it again. But clearly after the 9 p.m. watershed, from what you're alluding to. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us.
Thank you. I've just had